this. Ooh, we got a nice voice that says recording
I
in
was gonna
progress, so
say
you
I've
know it's
never heard
real.
that before.
No, no, she's very soothing for telling you that you're now recording. Like you expect for when you're recording them to be like, you're recording, do well. But instead it's like, you're now recording. Enjoy. Have a great evening. Um, so okay, so now that we are recording, I should probably be at least slightly more serious. Thank you everybody that's coming. I know people are still joining in, but I just want to really first of all thank everybody that's coming. I just came off of a weekend being at StokerCon, which was an absolute blast. I met so many cool people, but I only met like two or three other people that were from the books of horror community while I was there. And so I was like, I was a little sad. I was excited to be like, oh, I'm gonna meet like all these
It's
people
the
I've been
group.
interacting with
It's
online
like
for
the
so
best
long.
team.
And then and then I was like, nope. I met like one or two other people. But you know, it was a great time, and I can't wait to meet everybody that's going to Books and Brews or any of the future like author cons. It's gonna be super fun. I want to thank Becky. You gotta tell me if I pronounce your name wrong because everyone always pronounce my last name wrong and I hate it. Is it Burgess or Burgess?
It's Burgess. It's not as fancy
Burgess.
as Burgess. It's just Burgess.
Okay. Well, as someone who's been called Jon Cohen or Con for his whole life, I'm always like, well, you're very close. It's Cone, but like just like barely. Okay. Well, I really want to thank Becky Burgess for putting this all together. I have no idea what I'm doing with most of my life, but especially when it comes to putting together Facebook groups. So Becky has done pretty much all the heavy lifting. For those of you in the chat group, I somehow made that entirely by accident. Still don't know how. But thanks
It worked
everybody for
out.
being, yeah, thanks for being really nice and joining. So that was great. Yeah, anybody that wants to feel free to turn on cameras or whatever, like we're all loosey goosey, we're having fun. If you don't want to turn on your cameras, I get it also. Um, we're just here to have a good time. I did promise this to Becky earlier, and I'm going to show it off to everyone before we get any further. I'm wearing my Jeff Probst sweater, just
Yes.
it in honor of Slashtag because I generally tend to sell it as like Survivor meets H.H. Holmes meets Cabin in the Woods. And I had to show off not just my horror cred, but my true love of Survivor cred. My my wife bought this for me as a Christmas gift. I always buy like ugly Christmas sweaters, and she was like, "This is an all year round sweater," thinking it was like a joke and that I didn't have a limit to embarrassment. But we learned very quickly that our definitions of being embarrassed are very different, and I wear this out all the time now, completely unironically, because I just love Survivor. I've never missed a season. I've never missed an episode. It's not a joke in the show. I do love reality TV. I do love Survivor a lot. Um, but anyway, we're talking about Slashtag here. So thanks everybody for joining us. I think the way that we're going to do it tonight, I'm going to do a quick little, just kind of some fun little background stuff about Slashtag. I promise it'll be really quick and hopefully not boring. And then we're going to split up the Q&A because I know that some people want to yell at me about spoilers and some people have not finished reading the book yet. So we're going to do the first half is going to be spoiler free. And then when we kind of have spoiler free section done, I'll do a giveaway for everyone that's here. So anybody that showed up has been entered into the giveaway. We're going to give away some books. And then we'll do the second half, which is the Q&A that is like no holds barred. And I'll put the little content warning that if anyone hasn't read the book yet, to not go past that part. And then I'll post this tomorrow in the group. But for those who are just logging in and saying, how did I get here? I wrote this book Slashtag. It was the second book that I self-published, and somehow it made it into the brawl. I attribute it entirely to just being among the greatest human beings I've ever been in books of horror. I've been working as a board game professional for over 10 years, and I can tell you, with certainty that almost every fandom sucks. They're full of people that are toxic and mean and cruel. And then I stumbled upon books of horror, and it was just like, oh, a place where everybody's like universally really nice to each other and uplifting, and any drama that happens tends to get self-policed and squashed very quickly. This is amazing. Let me live here. So that's where I've spent the majority of my life online for the last couple of years. Is just in the books of horror group, meeting all of you people and making friends, which has been awesome. Um, if you've read Slashtag and want more in the Slashtag universe, Try Not to Die on Slashtag is now out.
Yes.
It's got somewhere, I think, around 30 possible deaths based on your choices. If you haven't read any of the Try Not to Dies, they're super worth it. They're from Mark Tullius. They're adult choose your own adventures that are legally distinct because choose your own adventure is extraordinarily litigious. So these are Try Not to Dies. I think it's a great workaround.
It's an
But yeah,
awesome book.
Thank you.
This is so much.
This is when I first gave it to my wife and she was reading it, because she's just as big of a horror fan as I am, and she's reading it, and she keeps looking at me being like, I am mad at you because I made the objectively right decision for being in a horror novel or a horror movie, and I died anyways. And I was like,
Exactly.
good.
That was me. I don't know how many deaths I met. I'm pretty sure it was about 20 something, and that was trying to live. So yeah.
Well, there's like only 20, like 25 or 27 deaths in total.
Yep.
So
I did not make good choices.
you fell for every trap.
I did.
But yeah, so this is
I went in trying to die and I survived.
Oh, I should have tried to die. Maybe that would have worked better for me.
Yeah, I guess
I
that's
know Mark's attitude about things and how he pictures things, and he does everything so opposite than what you're used to for the normal rules of a horror movie. And so after I died the fifth time, I said, no, I'm throwing it all out of the water and I'm going to die.
Yeah, that's what's so fun about it, though. And there's so many more coming. I cannot wait. I think it's already been announced, and if it hasn't, I'm sorry, but Andrew Nyberg has one coming out, his Shadowlands book based off the Neverborn Thief, which if you haven't read, like, it's fantastic. Everything he writes is fantastic. Um, if you haven't read Galatalk, you should read that. It's in the Brawl. But his other new book, The Neverborn Thief, is incredible, kind of dark fantasy, and he's doing I Try Not to Die set in that universe, and I can't wait because it's really, really interesting. But yeah, enough about selling out other people. Now I'm going to talk more about me. I've also got a holiday book called Everything is Temporary. It's about a family,
good.
it's about trust, but mostly it's about how my whole life I've been unhealthily obsessed with the movie A Christmas Story. And this one time when I was wandering around, no, I know A Christmas Story by heart. Like I can recite the entire movie from beginning to end. There is no December that goes by that I don't watch it at least 15 times. I'm a lunatic. But one time, really in real life, I walked by a house that said "Christmas House, come on in." And I was like, I'm either about to die or get a really interesting story. And thankfully, the latter happened. But
That's
yeah,
good.
this book is entirely based on a real thing that I thought about for 10 years before I had the nerve to write it.
That's
I've also
crazy.
got a book that The Island Mother that like 10 people have read. I'm really proud of it. It actually it features the beginning of the character Charlotte that appears in Slashtag. She's like Lucy's like number one go-to
Oh,
horse person. This is the beginning of Charlotte's story is in this.
Oh, okay.
I'll have to bump that up.
I kind of have this idea in my head that I want to make like a Krentler verse for sorry Mike, I'm not stealing your idea, but I want to have like all of these things in a universe that are kind of connected. I know my book that's coming out next year from Wicked House, called The Creed Falls Massacres, that also is in the Krentler verse. It's not like a direct sequel or anything, but there's definitely connections to a larger world that I'm I'm trying to build. And we'll get into it maybe in the question and answer if anyone ever wants to see a sequel for Slashtag. But I did write it with a trilogy in mind, and I've got the other two outlined. So
Yes.
we'll see if anybody like if there's demand, if people want it. I really want to write it, but
If
yeah, we'll see. We'll see. But I said I was going to share a couple things before we went to question and answer, and I very much want to get to question and answer. So let me share my screen because I have some visual things. The first is the original cover. So the cover that you see is not the original cover. This was the original cover that I had made. And as much as I liked it, I just didn't feel like it looked quite professional enough, like for a book. But what was really cool was that I got the guy in there, and so I made a bunch of stickers that are holographic based off the character on the front. I won't say that who the artist was, but I don't know. I just wasn't really super thrilled with it, so I ended up going with the other cover that everybody knows, and that one was done by Christian Bentalon, who's done like a bunch of other people's covers, and they're really fantastic. I also wanted to show, I'll show just a little bit of it because it's boring if I show more than one. This was the original map that I drew before writing the book. So I write everything the way that I've been a dungeon master. I played Dungeons and Dragons for like 20 years. I'm a huge stinking nerd. But the way that I do my prep process for writing books is I basically treat it like a Dungeons and Dragons campaign. So I create all the characters, I create the world, and I do as much world building as I can. And then I like just kind of throw my characters in and see what happens to them with like a general idea of like main points. So it's kind of like a mix between plotting and pantsing. But I find that if I have a really well-defined world, like a really easy sandbox to understand, then it's really easy for me once I put the characters in there to let them kind of make their own decisions and figure out where they're going to go. So I drew, and this is actually the last version before it became looking better than terrible. This was the last version I had. I had like all of these little things of like, this is the secret door, this is the guest room, and I have like color coded areas like this is going to lead upstairs, this could go somewhere else, and most of it is used between Slashtag, and then it was really helpful for the Try Not to Die because I was like, oh, there's all this stuff I forgot to get to or wasn't able to manage into the original. But the things that are circled in red are all the things that made it like 100% into Slashtag. And then everything else was something else. Like I hadn't figured out this room. I literally wrote something cool, maze question mark. This room ended up featuring in Try Not to Die. If you haven't read it yet, I won't explain what room it is, but it has something very creepy crawly. So this became something, but I couldn't figure it out until afterwards. And like the libraries in Try Not to Die, but it didn't make it into the regular one. But then I was like, okay, I want to have these different areas that are like that go between the different levels. And so I had these little like dark areas. So that was the original one. This is what made it into the book. So my wife is a graphic designer. She's extremely talented. And so she was able to take, this mess and turn it into something that looked, I thought, really, really cool. And it still had some of the kind of mystery to it. You still had these kind of grayed out areas, but it also showed you the areas where it was like, oh, you can go between levels here. And here's like the staircase. And when they get the app going, it tells them where the X's are. And so we had all of that. And I thought that was super cool to have in there. But then we took it a step further because I had this idea for like an Easter egg to make a companion website where I was going to have like, at first the idea was I was just going to have some like bios and a couple of extra little things. Basically, I was stealing Duncan Ralston's idea for his Ghostland companion website, which is also very cool if you haven't been to it. But then it like sprawled out into this whole thing, and I created a podcast and I wrote it and I brought all my friends in and I got the audiobook narrator to come in and play Lucy, and it spiraled into this whole thing. So then we made a really nice version of the map to go on the website to feel like something that like could have been found. And so this is the version of the map that's on the website that I thought was kind of neat. So yeah, you can kind of see like the evolution, and this is just the first floor. I have it for a second floor and basement, but again, I think it'd be really boring if I did all of this 3 times, so I'm just showing the one. But that's my visual aid. There's one other visual aid that's a little silly, but I think it's kind of worth talking about just for a minute. um Slashtag started out as a screenplay that my wife and I were co-writing, and it was nothing like the book at all. Tawny wasn't even the main character. The main character was someone who didn't even end up in the book at all. The original premise for the screenplay was that a bunch of specifically influencers were on put into a house, and it was going to be live streamed. But they were being all haunted by the ghost of a wannabe YouTuber whose parents were like drama mamas and wanted him to go viral, and he died
Oh my
accidentally
god.
lighting himself on fire while trying to do a cinnamon
Oh
challenge.
my gosh.
And the idea for and in the story, what happens is, because he's like so obsessed with social media, he only can appear on camera. And so there's all these like dead spots where there's no cameras in the house, but he only will kill people if he's on camera. And he's like weak to fire because he died by fire.
Oh
And
my
so like
gosh.
people start
Wow.
figuring out like they have to be on like an iPad, like watching the live stream so that they can like hide outside of the camera view. And then there's still the cosplayer who was working on in the original version. She's working on this giant like video game sword replica. And again, if you've read Everything is Temporary, I managed to work it in to that, which I had somebody who made a giant sword that they superheated so that they could cut the ghost with a hot sword, which happens in Everything is Temporary. And I was like, I thought that was such a fun idea, and I didn't want to lose it. So I was like, I'm going to use you somewhere. Similarly, I have a whole rant in Island Mother about why waffles are better than pancakes objectively. And that paragraph, like, there's a whole long thing. And I'm going to put it in a book at some point. But for now, it's still just sitting completely intact as a document on its own that's just called Waffles. And
Oh
some
my
point it's
gosh.
going to be in there. And so for all of you here tonight, you'll know, if you read one of my books and there's a long rant about why waffles are better than pancakes, I've had that preloaded for years.
I'll be on the lookout.
Yeah, yeah. So that's really all I actually had prepared for tonight, to kind of talk about, because who wants to hear me talk forever? Let's talk to
Oh,
each
get
other.
off of me, you fucking fat ass.
Let's all be friends. Let's talk to each other. So we're gonna avoid spoilers for the first half. We'll do the giveaway, and then we can talk spoilers, and you can all yell at me about whatever I've done wrong. Or you can yell at me about things I've done wrong that aren't specifically spoiler related now. But yeah, whatever you got, you throw at me. I've got a few that Becky had prepared if y'all want. Yeah, we can just turn the floor over to y'all. Anybody who wants to. I see a cat.
Is H.H. Holmes your inspiration for your serial killer and his Hotel of Death?
Absolutely, he is, and boy was I disappointed when I read the actual like story about H.H. Holmes and learned his real history. Because so like I do an intense amount of research when I write books. I learned my lesson thankfully early when I'd written The Island Mother. It originally featured Hawaiian gods, and I sent it to a Hawaiian sensitivity reader who is a professor in the University of Honolulu, and she was like, "Hey, just so you know, Hawaiians do not like it when you misappropriate their gods for other reasons. Like, legitimately, we hate Moana for their version of how they portrayed Maui because it's wrong and it's not cool." And so I was like, "Oh, okay, lesson learned, sensitivity readers, yay, research, yay." So I did a lot of research on H.H. Holmes thinking that I was going to get a bunch of ideas for gory, gross stuff. Turns out the guy was just a really opportunistic con man. All of the
He
hidden
was a
rooms that
pussy.
he had, all of the secret places in his building. It was because he had these really elaborate schemes where he would order furniture that was like cash on demand. They would deliver the furniture. He would immediately hide all the furniture in these hidden rooms. And then when the people would come to collect, he'd go, "How can I possibly give you money for furniture I don't have?"
Yeah, he was a real pussy. I mean, for a serial killer, he really was. I mean, he was very weak-minded, and ultimately he ended up the way he ended up just because of his infatuation with money.
Truly, truly. The people, people like to estimate that he killed like 30, 40 people. It's really honestly somewhere between like 2 and 8. And everybody
Yeah.
that he did kill was like people who is just because he got pushed to a point where it was like, ooh, I'm either super busted or I kill someone. And he killed people because of that. But I like to
Or they
take
were
the
children.
more, yeah, yeah. I like to take the more romanticized version of H.H. Holmes as my inspiration for this one because it's just
Right.
more interesting. He also actually did have an early interest in medicine too,
Yep.
but not quite to the same degree that I put Arthur Wilson, where he like kind of perverted it and turned it into a whole thing.
Right.
But that was back in a time when like honestly like doctors were looked at as kind of criminals almost because they were like, you're grave robbers, you're like cutting up people's corpses. It was a wild time. It's
Hmm.
really worth reading if you want to know more about H.H. Holmes and that whole era of time. I think it's called The Devil in Chicago, something like that. I should have remembered the name, but it's a really good book. I can't remember the name. Anyways, but yes, that's the answer to that question. A long-winded answer to that question.
Thank you.
I have a question. So, Jon, you mentioned about thinking of sensitivity readers and everything. And so that brings up one of my favorite characters. And I know no spoilers, but April. And April just being portrayed as a person with disabilities in a way where she was so well drawn and fleshed out. And so I was wondering if you could tell us a little about how you handled that, because that's another group where if you infantilized her, you're going to be offending people. So how did you handle portraying April in such a positive way? What did you do?
Oh, thanks. That's a great question. So it's a couple of things. I mean, like it's all based on life, right? So one of my best friends, I in college, this makes me sound weird. But I am weird, so it's fine. In college, I worked at this store at a mall called Zen-ish, and it was like the best name for what it was because it really was Zen-ish. Like they sold like fountains and like beautiful relaxing meditation CDs and like Zabatons and little luck trinkets. But it also had a wall full of swords, crossbows, and like
What?
tasers that the security guards would come in on weekends and tase each other as games. It was a wild, wild place to work. But I had a friend there who he was disabled and he was in a wheelchair and every single day he got on a bus that they would take him to the mall and he would kind of hang out at the mall every day. And so for hours, because this was a boring job. It's retail. Retail jobs are boring, especially at a store called Zenish in a mall where like people are mostly just going to go to Macy's or get some food. So he would come in and we would hang out for like 3 or 4 hours a day. And it really made my life bearable. And we're still friends. We're still really close friends to this day. But he was disabled, and but he was also like the coolest, most like confident person I've ever met in my life. He would give out cards. I'm the real Hutch. He's like, I'm a relationship expert. And he would give out cards, and I was like, Leia. Like he was just so cool.
Yeah.
And so he was part of the inspiration for the character. And then the other part was that I have a joint mobility disorder called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. Basically, it
What?
means that yeah, it basically means that my body produces way too much collagen and all my joints are made of garbage. And every time I like use my
I
hands
know
or
that song.
legs, I give myself like
I
micro
know
tears
that
and
song.
sprains. It's a disease that can really only be diagnosed by ruling out like 100 other
There's another
things.
one
So
that's I
I
think
spent like
it's
10 years, I feel like, trying to get diagnosed, going from doctor to doctor and then being like, yeah, like we'll take an X-ray and an MRI, and then they're
dreams
like, you're
come back to
fine.
memories.
And so then I was
I don't know if
eventually I
it's
got
bad
this
video. I
tattoo.
just know that one's kind of sad song.
I got this tattoo. It says, "This is where it hurts." And it points to my wrist. And I kind of got it as a joke because I was like, well, I'm tired of telling them all the time where it hurts. So, but I went to this doctor after getting the tattoo and he laughed and he was like, oh, that's like a joke, right? And I was like, no, I'm in pain 100% of the time. And he was like, oh, we should maybe take that seriously. And I was like, that would be great. So we went through the long process of diagnosing me. And it turns out I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and over a long period of time. And so, like over this period of time, for a long time, it was just the right arm and not the left arm that hurt. And so I went through every possible um, accessibility focused controller or gaming accessory I could find at the time, which was honestly not a lot. But I love video games. I've always loved video games. And when this first happened, it was a bicycle injury that was like the most minor thing you could ever imagine. I literally wasn't moving. I was learning how to clip into a bicycle and I fell over and hurt my wrist. And then it just never got better. And I thought for a long time, it was just like, I don't know, there's something a little wrong with me. It turns out there was something a lot wrong with me. But I was getting like, I was buying things so I could play video games with just my left hand for years. And so like, I have like these controllers where like, it connects, and this controller is for my foot to use to control the right thumbstick, and it's got like all of these like extra buttons here. Like when I was on my computer, I have like this monstrosity which is like 30 buttons, and you can like move your fingers in like 100 different ways. So the reason I had April as this character who is kind of starting this business and really focusing on empowering people who are differently abled was a mix of me having like one of my best friends is differently abled, and I am differently abled. So that was something I really wanted to get right because it was something really personal to me. I hope that answers your question or doesn't super over answer your question. All right. Well, while we wait for anybody else to chime in, I got some questions that Becky had prepared for me here. How did you get started in the board game industry, and how did writing books come from that? That's a great question because it's basically my life story. I've been a professional board game designer for over 10 years now. I focus on licensed games. I made like a Munchkin Ninja Turtles game. I made a Ghostbusters game. And now I'm the lead designer for a company called Stop the Killer Games. I just co-designed a game based off the movie Thanksgiving with Eli Roth, which was wild. He's a very interesting man. He's the best way I can describe him is he's like a 16-year-old in a 51-year-old's body, like in the best way. But I've been making board games for a long time. And then when the pandemic hit, the board game industry surprisingly just disappeared. People tend to think like, oh, I'm surprised that like the board game industry fell apart during COVID. You'd think people were hanging out. The thing is, most board games actually, unless you like have a family that really loves to play the same board games over and over again, most board game enthusiasts like bring their friends over to play board games, which became like literally impossible during the pandemic. So all my jobs that I was working on completely dried up basically overnight. I had multiple games signed. I had a Batman murder mystery where everyone got to play as the villains of Batman. And it was a whole murder. But it was for like 30 people. And the company was like, WB signed off on it. DC signed off on it. We're going to publish it. We just need to do one more play test. And they told me this on March 12th, 2020. I think you can guess what happened after that. So leading up until that point, I from 2016 on, I had written one book. It had taken me 4 years, and it still hasn't come out. It was meant to be the first in a horror series that was also like an urban fantasy series, basically kind of like Buffy but scarier because Buffy's my inspiration for pretty much everything in some capacity or another. But it was a major influence. Buffy was, and I wanted to write this book. Eventually, I will publish it. it was my first book, and I was like, it's like 200,000 words, and I have to get back to it. Anyways, I wrote that book, and I was like, I have to shelve this. It's not good enough. And then yeah, the board game industry died, and I was like, well, maybe I should take writing again, take another crack at writing a novel. And so I wrote The Island Mother based off of a trip I'd been on to Hawaii. And I'd always been thinking about there were a lot of people there that were very demanding, privileged, awful. And so I was like, what if I wrote a book that was more from the perspective like White Lotus, kind of, where it's like, oh, these are the people who are the service workers at a really fancy hotel. And so then I was like, okay, I'm gonna write this, and that came out. And even though only like 20 people read it, I submitted it to Publishers Weekly for this thing called the Book Life Prize, and the book ended up winning Best Horror Novel of 22 for Book Life, for Publishers Weekly's Book Life Prize, which is wild because again, like 20 people have read this book. And so I was like, oh, I'm gonna get so many readers off of this. I won the award of best horror novel from Publishers Weekly. Meant nothing. I got 0 sales from it. But I was jazzed. I was like, well, at least I've got this one thing that feels like vindication, that feels like validation that I'm at least on the right track. So then I went, and I'd already kind of simultaneously I'd been writing that screenplay to Slashtag, and I'd been trying to sell it to a friend of ours that worked at Netflix, or have her like pitch it to people, and she was like, this sucks. And I was like, okay, well, I liked the name, and I liked the basic premise, so let me just start over completely from the beginning, and write Slashtag as something totally different. That's just what I want. And then I did, and then people, it turns out, liked it. And then I found Books of Horror, and Books of Horror was really what did it, that got Slashtag to get readers. And then everything is Temporary came out, and that got a bunch of readers, and now, like, shockingly, Slashtag is like being posted, and people are posting pictures of it in Barnes and Noble, and I'm like, my head's exploding. Because like I'm self-published. My first book with a publisher is Try Not to Die on Slashtag. My next publisher book is Wicked House, which is coming out next year. The 3 novels that I self-published, I just did it because I thought, if why not? Like, if nobody else is going to take a chance on me, I'll take a chance on me. And it's like paid off, which is like so fucking crazy. I I'm still pinching myself for it. Just the fact that I have as many people that haven't left this room yet is just like shocking to me. Truly, truly, thank you all for reading. Thank you all for buying my books. Or at least accepting my books when I just try sending them to you unprompted. Uh, thank you for letting me give you stickers. It's been awesome. And then this year I got this job working as lead designer for Stop the Killer Games, and I've got to work on some of my favorite movie licenses like Basket Case, Black Christmas, Thanksgiving. It's been a really cool year and a half. So thank you everybody for letting me have a really, really cool past couple of years, and I hope that it doesn't all fall apart. So yeah, that's the answer to that question. Anybody got any other questions before I move on to anything else? All right, I'll read the next one. I'm drinking my ginger ale in between. Oh, the next question I already answered in one degree, but there's a kind of a fun story, which is, how did you get the idea for Slashtag? Did the idea for Krentler Media come first, or the idea for a reality show? So yeah, the idea for a reality show was originally from the screenplay, and then it kind of got turned into a new thing. But the name Krentler has kind of a funny story behind it. So one of my wife's best friends, her last name is Krentler, and her mom's name is Krentler. I will not stop it. I will continue. Thank you very much. But sorry, that was just too funny. But my wife's friend and her mom, her mom is like the nicest woman in the entire world, but her last name is Krentler, and for some reason I just thought it was like a great name for a bad guy. And so I was like, yeah, I asked her, I was like, can I use your last name as like a bad guy name? And she was like, oh, that's kind of silly, but sure. And now, like, unbeknownst to her, now I've like turned it into the like crux of my entire like novel series, where it's like, this is the Krentler verse. All the books are named after you now, and you're the villain of all of them. So that was a really nice thing that I did. Oops, sorry, Mrs. Krentler. Um, I did that with my other book too, and I may end up changing it with the book that I have unreleased. The bad guy's name is Caceres, and it's named after one of my best friends from college. But again, I was like, your last name just sounds like the name of a demon, Caceres. I thought it was cool. So I put it in there, and I may end up having to change that just because I feel so bad for what I've done to Kathy Krentler. It's like the nicest woman in the entire world, and now she's only going to be known as the monster of the Krentlerverse. Oops. All right.
This isn't a question, it's just something I realized. Isn't Krentler also the name of the character in Hannibal who gets his brain eaten?
Ooh,
Isn't
oh,
it? Am I just making that up?
that's a great question.
I can't remember
All
his
I'm
first.
thinking of is Verger. I'm thinking Mason Verger.
No, the guy
That's
that
Was it Ray Liotta?
yeah, wasn't his name Krentler?
was his name Krentler?
I
Oh my
have to look it up real
gosh.
quick or it's gonna
Yeah,
drive me
let's all do
crazy.
a quick Google on this
Um,
one.
Paul Krendler with a D instead of
Ah.
a T.
Oh, okay.
So
All
close.
right. Well, we were close. We were close. Oh, buddy. All right. Well, all right. Now I've got extra sound pollution coming in. My dog has a Mr. Bill toy that goes, "Oh no!" when
Oh
you
my
squeeze him.
gosh.
So he's in here going to town on it. So if you,
And we don't get to see him?
hey, buddy.
Oh,
So this is Gizmo.
but
He's my little
Sammy is bad.
buddy.
Yes,
He
that's a puppy
does.
on there, Sam.
He has a case of early onset grump, so he's not going to be too
Oh.
thrilled to stay on camera or do really anything. But we call him Gizmo because of his huge ears, and he's my best little
No.
buddy. But
Oh, I love
he's
him.
already run off to go and torment Mr. Bill some more, so off he goes. And
Oh,
then we
he's
have
adorable.
a second dog we just got that's a 16-week-old puppy named Miss Cordelia Chase, which
Oh,
again, if you haven't
Buffy.
figured out yet, I love Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yes.
Why isn't there
Okay, so is Tanya's boyfriend's character based off of you?
D-Rec? No. No. D-Rec is straight up based off of Logan Paul.
That's
which,
who I pictured as D-Rec
Okay.
when I was reading it.
and the funny
Okay.
thing is that like Tawny gets in trouble in the very beginning of the book. So like no real spoilers. The beginning of the book is her getting in trouble for having had this this power drink. And then it turns out that Logan Paul came out with a power drink like
Okay.
6 months after the book came out, and I was like, well, this is very strange. But sometimes life is stranger than fiction. And so yeah, no, D-Rec is completely based on Logan Paul. Landon Keating is based off of Jared Leto and a bunch of interviews I watched
Yes,
with
I
Jared
could see
Leto.
that.
And then everybody else is kind of either an amalgam of people or just completely a new idea. Like the Chef Costanza with the mask. I love watching Binging with Babish on YouTube. So I was like, oh, like a guy who doesn't show his face. That's like a fun thing. And then I also just love Seinfeld. So I gave him a George Costanza mask.
Yes, that's awesome.
Was Britt Holly based on anybody in specific?
Yes and no. I mean, she's vaguely based on all the Kardashians.
Of course.
She seemed too nice to be a Kardashian to me.
And then a little bit Honey Boo Boo. Because there's like the whole like child star aspect to her. And like the what was it? I called it Drama Mamas in the book, but it was Toddlers and Tiaras was the real show.
Okay.
And so I was like, what if we had a character that like started there and then reached like Kardashian levels of success, on her own without her mom doing all the work. So I was like, okay, that's so that was kind of the idea of Brit. And then obviously somebody who's a little, and then she's smart, right? Like, just like I feel like the Kardashians are, it's like, well, when you're doing something, that seems kind of silly or overboard on TV, it's like, are you actually doing this, or are you playing a character that you fully understand how they're coming across, and you are actually very, very smart and know what you're doing? And that's kind of what I imagined. That's what I imagined from the Kardashians, and that's what I imagined for Brit.
Awesome.
And then I just liked Kawaii Kiki because I don't know, I
That's
like
cool.
cosplayers.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
just thought she was fun.
Yeah, I just thought
Um,
she was every cosplayer I've ever seen.
kind of. I've seen a lot of YouTube videos of people who are cosplayer, like professional cosplayers, and it's like your life looks so stressful. Like, it just looks like it's just like, okay, I need to build this thing that everyone's going to think takes like 10 minutes to make, but it actually takes like 200 hours to make. Um, and I felt like having that kind of come across as a character. Um, I don't know. I thought it was like worth mentioning, just because I watch a lot of these videos of people where they do like the how I made it, and it's like jaw dropping the amount of work that these people put into these projects. And then I feel like people don't understand or don't give them the credit that they deserve, and that makes me sad. I know Kawaii Kiki kind of takes it to a different level, but the basis of the character was all meant in kindness and goodness. All right. Let's see, I got another question on here, unless anybody's got something. Oh, now that Slashtag is in the brawl and getting attention, will we get a sequel in the future? I want to so badly. I want to write a sequel so badly. I may make it a post at some point in the future in the discussion group if people actually want to read a sequel to Slashtag, because I would love to. And I've got a whole trilogy planned out. I've got places for Tawny and April to go. Yeah, I'd love to. I'd love to. So that would be great. And then which of your books was your favorite to write? That's a hard question. That's a really hard question, because they're all your babies, right? Mike knows what I'm talking about, right? They're all your babies. I went back, I read, man, after I read Hollow, I was like, okay, I need to read all the Linkville books. But then you go back and you're like, okay, so like I went and read Damn to Hell, and I'm like, I know Marla. I know her from Hollow. And so I was like, this is what I love to see. I love to see when somebody clearly has enough love for what they've written that they're like, no, I can't let these characters go, and I need to bring them into my other things, because I love them, and I want them to keep existing. And that was one of the coolest things when I was reading all of Mike's books, was like the way that they're in there but don't have to be in there. It's like you can read any one of them on their own and be like, this is a cool story, this was everything I needed to know. But then when you read the other things, you're like, ooh, okay. And so like now I get like why in Hollow one character's arc was all about going into the I'm sorry, Mike, if I'm giving spoilers in your book, but like in a Hollow, like there's this whole storyline where this character is keeps getting pulled back into his like AA kind of a support group. And it's like, okay, but that support group was in Damn to Hell. And so it's like, whoa, look at this. We like, you got that planned and payoff. And I love stuff like that. So yeah, I've got little bits of that in all the books I've written, and so like all my books are my favorite to write. I think the most fun one to write was Try Not to Die on Slashtag, because I just got to write a bunch of really silly death scenes, and it was just fun. Like, it was just fun the whole way through. Um, Everything is temporary. The first draft was really fun, and I was feeling super confident because Slashtag was doing pretty well, and I gave it to my editor, and my editor was like, "This needs a lot of work," and I was like, "What?" I thought it was perfect. And then I was like, I'm fallible. And then I completely changed everything about it based on her suggestions. Lindsay Smith, who's like the best editor everywhere. I trust her implicitly on any direction she gives me. But she was like, this book needs work. And I was like, oh, If you say so. And then it turns out every like suggestion she had made the book like that much better. And like everything that people say they love about everything is temporary, or all the ideas that Lindsay had. And so I'm like, well, you're right about everything. And for now until forever, I'm just gonna trust you more than I trust myself. She knows because he's a pro. And I'm still learning. I'm still figuring stuff out. Right. I mean, that's the big difference between between anything, like I always tell this at board game stuff. This is like a total weird aside, but people ask me a lot of time about like breaking into the board games industry, and they're like, "How do I break into the board game industry?" And I always ask, like, "Have you finished making your game?" And I ask this, I say the same question to people who are writing stuff that want to be writers, and it's like, "Is your book finished?" And by finished, I mean like done, done. And almost always the answer I get is no. And it's like, okay, well, that's what separates 99% of people from the people who like make it. It's not that like, and the answer of why people haven't done something is almost always the same too, which is that they're like, it's not good enough yet. And it's like, okay, nobody ever started out as a master of something. Like a couple people have, and they're stupid and they're really, really talented, and fuck you. But like most of us had to earn our way by failing at things and trying things and seeing if it worked and then trying again. And if you wait until you have something that's perfect, or you're a master at something, you're never going to come out with it. And so you have to come to a point where you're like, this is the best that I can do at the level that I am, and I'm going to just move forward on it based on that. And that's how I started my board game career. And I've been writing long before I was writing novels. I've been writing for like all sorts of other stuff, but like I had the same mentality for writing, which is like, it's done when it feels like it's the best that I can do without like putting in another 200 hours for like 2% better, right? Like at a certain point, you get diminishing returns. I keep a picture on my wall. It's like my life motto, which is, we don't do this because it's easy. We do this because we thought it was going to be easy. And that's like, I tell myself that like every day. Like, we didn't do this because it's easy. We did this because we thought it's easy, but that's not going to stop us from doing it. And you can't let it stop you from doing it. And like I feel like I'm because I'm just a goofball dum dum. But like if I can get a book into Barnes and Noble by just keeping at it, like I feel like anybody can. If you keep working at it, or if whatever your goal is, like if you just keep working at it and do the thing and like practice at it, like you can do it. Because yeah, truly, I have like no other marketable skills. Like I can't do things, but like I have a bunch of people listening to me ramble right now, which is just like I'm still like, what why are you people even here listening to me? I'm rambling. Um, oh, here's a great
Some of the
question.
greatest minds in the world are ramblers.
Oh,
Mhm.
I
Einstein couldn't tie his shoes.
well, I appreciate that. I do know that that Rod Serling was notoriously a chatterbox who would never shut up. And he wrote the first version of every best horror story we've ever read or
Yep.
seen. So, sometimes there is something to be said for rambling. I'm going to take a sip of ginger ale. If anyone has any questions while I'm doing so, feel free.
Sal has a question. Okay, so two questions. A, what are you currently working on? Like, what don't we know that you have currently in your computer? And second of all, I can't write first person horror to save my freaking life. Any advice?
Awesome. Well, thank you, Mike. You said you were going to come here and disrupt, and here you are asking thoughtful, poignant questions. All right. So first of all, so writing in first person. Here's the key: be incredibly anxious. That's the best answer I can give you. Is I'm an incredibly anxious person. I feel things a lot. And I'm not afraid to say that I feel things hard, and that I think about things hard, and I lose sleep about things because I'm anxious about things. And so for me, first person comes naturally because I am stuck in my head. I'm stuck in there, whether I like it or not, all the time. And so I feel comfortable there. I feel comfortable in first person because I'm thinking about how I would react to a situation, and it's usually to be frightened. So I feel like it works for writing horror. But yeah, there are definitely some hard, tricky things with first person, especially when I was writing Slashtag. One of the big lessons was like, oh, I've got 7 people in a room, and I can't describe what all of them are doing because I'm from the perspective of only one person. And I need to make this, and sometimes we're having like puzzles happening, and we're like, people are solving pieces of puzzles in different places, and there's a certain point where you kind of have to give up control over the reader knowing everything that's going on, and making sure that the reader only needs to know what your main character knows is going on, because that's the person that they are taking their journey with at the end of the day. Um, and I just like to keep my stories really, really, really tight on people. So even if I am writing third person, I can't go omniscient. That's like my kryptonite, is like I cannot do something where I'm like, this is what this person's thinking, and then this is what this person's thinking, and like this is what's all happening. If I'm going to write in third person, it's like, no, we're just following this one person until the end of their chapter, and then we'll jump to another person. I absolutely can't do that. So yeah, the answer is I worry a lot first person. To answer your other question, what's something that I'm working on? So I'm working on my latest draft for Creed Falls Massacres, which is coming out 2025, Wicked House Publishing. It's kind of my love letter to like Freddy versus Jason, but it's Jason versus the Strain, like Guillermo del Toro's The Strain.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so once again I did something where I was like, I'm gonna do something kind of ambitious, and then realized halfway through that I did something slightly too ambitious and had to scale back. But the idea is that it's called the Creed Falls Massacres because there's multiple massacres happening at once. There's an infectious disease creating monsters all over town, and there's basically Jason also walking through town.
Oh my
And
gosh.
at some point they have to come into contact with each other. The other thing I am working on, which may end up coming out before then, may not, it depends. I've got a bunch of board game projects that I'm working on that I actually can't talk about because I got NDAs. But the other book I'm writing is something, it's called Soulbound. And I'll just give you the very basic premise. It's what if all at once we discovered that the human soul not only exists, but soul binds exist, soulmates exist. And what
Wow.
if at once, when one person dies, what if their soulmate or soulmates die? And so
Wow.
it's an apocalypse story. It's not part of the Krentler verse. It's going to be my first novel that's not part of that universe because it's an apocalypse story, where when you die, the 1 to 2 people that are closest to you die, and maybe that's not always reciprocated. Maybe the person you thought is your soulmate, they die and you don't. And what
Oh.
happens? Um, or what if, there's a lot of what ifs in this one. It's going to be the most kind of ruminative story that I've written. It also is probably going to be the most violent because it's the most human. That's the only supernatural element there. And in my mind, there's nothing worse than people being awful to people. Like monsters are like animals, right? Like animals kill people, animals kill things because that's what they do. They have prey drive. That's what they're on this earth to do. People don't have to kill each other. People don't have to be sadistic to each other. But they can and often are. And that's what this book is kind of about, is what happens when those of us are left over, when all the people that really love each other have died.
Ooh, creepy.
Yeah,
Would
so it'll be a
would
really
hu-
fun,
would
lighthearted
humanity
story.
survive?
Sorry?
It would be one of those cases of, if that was to happen, would as a species would we survive?
Yeah, no, it is because and that's something to think about. And I actually did a lot of research. I've done actually an insane amount of research on this because I talked about like if something like this happened, what amount of the population would be likely to lose within the first 24 hours because you think like if a guy gets in a car crash and dies, all of a sudden, like his wife might be like an airplane pilot for like a commercial airline, and
Yeah.
then that plane goes down,
Oh,
and then like 250 people die, and then all of their loved ones die, and they might be driving on a freeway in an oil tanker, and that may cause an explosion, and then a bunch of more people die, right? And so it's just like
Just
boom,
a
boom,
really
boom, boom, boom.
chain reaction of death.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like a
It
supernatural Final Fantasy.
Mm.
kind of. Although we're not going to have any materia or aeons to summon.
That's
So,
good.
but yeah, that's what I'm working on right now for writing. And then I've got a short story that is due relatively soon. That's actually more Hawaiian folklore. It's about night marchers. If you've never, I'm obsessed with Hawaiian folklore. In case you haven't figured it out. But if you have never looked up night marchers, it's actually pretty fascinating. There's some really cool stories about them. They're Hawaiian ghosts. They're very cool.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's what I'm working on. All right. Do you have any other questions? I got one other in here that I can read.
Just real quick, now that you've seen the success for Slashtag, would you be willing to resubmit a screenplay to make it a short miniseries?
Yeah, after Slashtag came out and when the writer's strike happened, I have my friend at Netflix who no longer is at Netflix. She's now gone entirely, but she had a couple friends who were like connected, and she actually liked Slashtag when it came out as a book. She hated it as a script, but she sent it to some of her friends, and the strike was going on, and so like they had nothing to do, and so a couple people read it and sent it to a couple of companies, and I actually got to have a couple meetings with a studio, and they turned me down in probably what was the nicest way possible because I have no idea if they were being honest or not. But but like I was like, oh, I agree with you. But they were like, we really like the story, but we think it would be better as a mini series than as a movie, as a limited series. And I was like, I agree. I think it would be better as a limited series because then we could have each character kind of get their own episode. And they were like, no, 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 you don't understand. We don't make limited series.
Oh, wow.
And
Oh
I was
no.
like, oh, right, right. Okay, I'm picking up what you're putting down now.
Mm.
But yes, I would love for Slash Tag to be a limited series. I would love to pitch it again. That company does want me. They said to come back when I've got Soulbound done and pitch it to them because they think that that could be a fun movie. But whatever. It is what it is. The thing I always look at Duncan Ralston as like my template of like success. Womb didn't become popular until 7 years after he published it. Any of these things could find an audience at any time. Anything can happen. Anything can go in any direction. It's just about being open and not being disappointed when things don't work out and being excited when things do. What is the saying? Hope for sun, plan for rain. I feel like I like to
Mhm.
do that. Kevin Smith said that once, where when he was like hyping up Mallrats 2, or not Mallrats 2, Clerks 2, and he was like, the movie might be okay, it might suck. I don't know. I feel like it's always better to say that something's going to be bad and get people's expectations low, and then like have them be pleasantly surprised than say like I've got the best thing ever, and then it sucks. So I'm going to keep trying, but if nothing comes of it, nothing comes of it. I mean, what's already come of it has been the most incredible thing that's ever happened to me. So like I could never like look at it as a bad thing if nobody wants to make a movie or TV series out of Slash Tag because it was a book and people found it and people liked it. And that's like the coolest feeling in the entire world. So um here's a good one. What's your favorite Buffy episode? I know I'm so obsessed with Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and it's a weird choice too because it's like my wife's least favorite episode. My favorite episode is season 3, Take episode 13. It's the Zeppo. It's the one where everyone decides that Xander is worthless. And they're all really melodramatic about something that's happening. But Xander goes on this like misadventure with this guy who's been recently dead and he doesn't realize the guy's recently dead and a zombie. He's just like the school bully. And they go on this like weird, wacky like quest together, and while everyone else is having a really serious time. I can't specifically articulate why it's my favorite episode. I think it's an episode where Xander, who's a character that is not my favorite character by a long shot, and one of the most flawed characters on the show. But he has a moment where he is a hero and he does something really great. And he does something really courageous. And I thought that it was so in character and out of character for him, where it's like it's not in his character to behave this way, but it's because he earned it over the course of this episode and his arc overall, that like I think that episode ends in a way that I think is really really well done. So yeah, the Zeppo. I love the Zeppo. I also just love season 2 episode 3 School Hard, because it's the first episode that Spike shows up in, and Spike is the best character. I will forever ship Spike and Buffy. All right. Unless anyone else has anything right now, I think it's a good time to do a giveaway. And then after a giveaway, then you guys can all yell at me about everything that you hate, and we can talk spoilers. So we're gonna do a giveaway, and it doesn't have to be Slashtag. Like if you win a book, it could be any of the books. So like if you've already got Slashtag, or if I already like sent you a signed copy of Slashtag that you didn't even ask for, like you could ask for something else and I'll send you something else. And either way, you're gonna get like more stickers and buttons than you want also, because I can't stop. So here's what I'm gonna do. I've got everybody here in a little rubric here. I've got 12 people here. I'm just going to do a random number generator, and we're going to pick 5 people, and I'm going to get a piece of paper so that I can write down who you are, and then I'll like follow up with you later. So I've got my number generator here. The first number is 2. That's not useful. That's me. Let's do it again. The first number is 8. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Allison Hodina. I'm so bad. I'm sorry. I'm so bad at names. Allison. You won. Here we go.
I'm sorry, I have a baby behind me. So, but yay. Yay.
That's great. How do you pronounce your last name, just so I don't screw it up again?
It's Hodana.
Hodana. Okay, Allison Hodana. Either message me later or we'll get in touch, and we'll figure out what book you want. All right.
Okay, awesome.
Okay, next one, book number 2. Okay, we're getting number 12 out of 12. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Sally Feliz or Feliz. I'm not good at pronunciation, but Sally, you've won a book.
Thank you.
All right. So yeah, talk to me later and I will send you a book. All right. Doot. No, 2 again. Really? I'm right here. Right. That's the downside here. All right, number 5. We got number 5, Shelby. Shelby, you are the 3rd winner.
Woohoo.
So yeah, again,
Now I feel like shit because this is the second giveaway that I've won, so you've gotten 0 of my money. Can I donate to you?
you donate it to a friend who likes horror.
I don't think.
Or leave it in a park with a little piece of paper sticking out that says, "Do you like horror?" That's what I do with all the copies that I order that are author copies that are damaged. I just stick a little piece of paper and I say, "Do you like horror books?" And I just leave it at the park.
I mean, I still want the book, but I want to give you money.
Well, I mean, you can just give me money, but I'm gonna send you the book regardless.
Yeah, no, I do want the book, but I also want you to have my money.
Cool.
Because I won the giveaway before, and you sent me 2 books, so this is.
Well, I love money, so that's great. As we all know, you get into board games and writing to get rich. I'm all about the money. These careers combined, I'll tell you, make me dozens and dozens of dollars. All right. right. Ooh, and we got a buddy. Number 6, Cassandra. You are our next winner.
Yay, I had to go outside with the dog, so I turned my camera off.
That's okay. Just as long as you know that you are a winner in life and in this game.
Perfect.
All right. Oh no, Debbie's joining. I love Debbie. Debbie's the nicest human being in the entire world. Oh, she's not, but she's still connecting. I don't know if she hears me yet. All right, we're gonna click it one more time. All right. Oh, number 8 again. I think I already have number 8. All right. We'll do it again. Okay, number 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Crystal, you are our last winner.
Yay!
All right. So I've got your names written down here on a piece of paper that also seems like a tax form I should have turned in. I am a very well-organized person.
Whoopsie.
You can get another form 1040V, right?
Yeah, probably.
I'm sure it's fine. But yeah, y'all won some books or a book each, and it doesn't have to be /tag. So talk to me later and we'll figure some stuff out. All right, great. Oh, we have a bunch of comments in here. Oh no, did anyone ask questions in the comments and I didn't know? I don't know. It's all right because we're moving on. Okay, cool. Thank you, Becky, for keeping up. I am a mess. Anyways, we're now moving on to phase 2 of the night, which is the everyone yell at me part of the night for killing their favorite character. So we're now in spoiler zone. If you haven't read the book, get out of here. We're going to tell you everybody that dies and everything that happens and spoil all the secrets, including the fact that the secret is that this isn't ginger ale, it's beer.
Oh!
Dun dun dun!
Were you going to stop recording for the spoilers?
No, I'm going to keep it going. And just if anybody wants to leave, they can. We're all having fun here. Why not?
Boom.
All right. Uh-oh, no spoilers for Sally. Bye, Sally. Thanks for coming.
Bye.
All right. Now let's get into the nitty gritty. Okay. Let's have ourselves a little Jeff Probst time. Let's get to tribal council here.
Oh man.
what you got for me?
So when D-Rec, I did not like him at first because I cannot stand Logan Paul, and he grew on me so much during the book. And then as soon as, oh my god, I was so mad. He went out a hero, but he grew on me. Like he really, really just, oh my gosh. That one made me sad.
That's the only one that like genuinely upset me because I really hated him and then I really loved him. Mm-hmm. My other characters that I loved survived. So that was the one that really, really got me, I think.
I wasn't mad. I thought it was really well done. I actually cried. And so I was like, wow, that was a well-written character. It made me cry.
Aw. Well, thank you. This will maybe make it worse. D-Rex survives in the first draft.
That did make it worse for me when you said that earlier.
Yeah, really. Would have been better off not knowing that.
I was like,
he was alive in the end of the first draft, but there were just too many survivors. So in the end of the first draft, there was no epilogue also. And so I didn't have an epilogue. It just sort of ended with them kind of being like, we're going to figure out a way out. And Hector comes in a car and picks them up. And I was like, okay, so we've got 5 survivors. And I was like, 5's too many. If we include, because we've got Tawny and Sean who were in it. And Tawny and Sean were always going to survive. Mm-hmm. April, I honestly didn't know, but I really wanted to not write her as a manic pixie dream girl, and I got a little worried that I was starting to get into that territory while I was writing it. So I was like, I may have to kill April. But then I feel like I liked her too much by the end to do it, so I didn't. And then Hector I feel like Hector has big sequel potential. So I was like, I'm keeping Hector too. So then I was like, okay, well, I've got 5 people living. 5 is just too high of a number. 7 people entered, 5 people leave. That's not how Thunderdome works. So I had to kill somebody else, and unfortunately, that person was Drek. And I felt like it was okay to kill him for 2 reasons. The first was that while he did have a redemption arc, he also was an asshole. And sometimes assholes, sometimes a redemption arc can hit you harder. When someone starts out as an asshole and then you like them and then they die, you're like, oh, that's that. Like I grew to like them. The other thing was I didn't think people were going to think I would kill him after I fake killed him halfway through the book. When he falls down the pit, people are like assume he's dead, and then he's alive, and you people are like, because I had at that point also had a couple of beta readers. I'd had my wife read it, and so like I kind of had it. I knew by that point that people did like Drek. So that was also a little bit of the like Joss Whedon in me being like, kill the best characters. But not in like a gross Joss Whedon, like in real life Joss Whedon kind of way, more like as a Joss Whedon as a writer kind of way. I want to make a clear distinction between the man and the thing he created. But yeah, I was like, if people won't suspect that I'll kill Drek after I already killed Drek. But I did, and that's what happened.
Oh.
Yeah.
Man.
What else you got?
I'm curious why you didn't allow her to kill the VP or whoever he was at the end of the book. After, they figured it all out, she finds the amulet, it's all done and over with. Why you allowed him to live?
So I don't think I really did allow anyone to live. And you mean in the scene where she's got the cup and because she has the ghosts, she conjures up the ghosts to kill Ron.
Right.
And then we've got William Krentler, who's like the showrunner, he's the president. But
right.
But I didn't want to show his death. I thought it was better because he wasn't, as much as he's like the guy who's the puppeteer behind the whole thing, he's not Tawny's villain. He's not the villain of Tawny's story. The villain of Tawny's story is Ron, this guy that like attacked her as a kid and has tormented her his whole life. And so I was like, okay, I really wanted to focus on like his death and like making that feel really good. And so then for Krentler himself, it was like, well, I don't want to just have another like long death scene that doesn't feel like it's adding more to the story. So I kind of was just like, she's going to bring Arthur Wilson back because he was the one who was all obsessed with getting Arthur Wilson in, and let the reader kind of imagine how Arthur kills him now that she says, Arthur, I give you permission to do whatever you want now. And so we kind of imagine that Arthur kills William Krentler in whatever way Arthur feels is best. It probably involves a scalpel.
To me, it just seemed like if you had killed everyone off who was involved to some extent, then there would have been no reason for them to go out, and do, the whole, scene of setting this next person up.
I think she's talking about the VP that took over the company at the end of the book.
Exactly.
Gotcha. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah. Billy Krentler, the son.
Yes.
Yes. Who coincidentally was the ghost in my original movie script.
Oh, that's funny.
Yes. So I did keep him alive because I did fall in love with the story, and I felt like that at the end of it, it had potential to go into a sequel or to go into an expanded universe. And so I thought, like, what if he had a son that like he didn't bring in there, who had like some other job that he was doing while Slashtag is airing. And now this guy like understands, like he knows what's going on. He knows the business. Maybe he's, even worse because he's like not 95 years old. He's like in his 30s and he's like, yeah, I'm young, evil, and I know business.
Gotcha.
So yeah, I kind of wanted to set him up as a larger big bad that can kind of bring the company into new eras as well, because I didn't want Krentler Media to always just be one thing. I thought it would be also fun moving into other stories if Krentler Media could expand into other directions. And if you have a different person in charge of the company, it's like, oh, the company pivoted after the death of all the board of directors, and the new head of the company took it in a wildly different direction. And so if we can do that, then like it opens up so many more storytelling opportunities, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's why he's alive there.
Gotcha.
I'm curious what everybody else's like jaw drop moment was in the book, because for me it was when all of a sudden there was a figure standing there and Sean and Tawny were like, wait, didn't we get rid of the body totem? And she's like, no, it's not Arthur, it's Landon. That like,
Yes.
what? Like,
Wow.
just that he got so absolutely broken and brainwashed into like just doing his role again. I was like, oh my God. Like that oh, that was my jaw drop moment for the book.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm curious. Yeah, what were people's favorite parts, or like, yeah, most surprising parts? I'm interested to hear.
I have to keep moving like crazy. Oh, so sorry. I have to keep delaying because my son is going nuts. I don't know about favorite, but the part that gave me the most anxiety was the dumbwaiter part.
Oh yeah.
Because I'm not I wouldn't say that I'm claustrophobic, but in a really tiny space like that, I don't feel like I would like that very much. And just the way it was written, like, gave me a lot of anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm very claustrophobic. In fact, my wife told me that scene needed like a full page of cutting because it was so long in the dumbwaiter. It was a much longer scene originally, and then I had to cut it back because my claustrophobia really got the better of me as I was writing that bit. Oh, I can share the part for me that I think was the most jaw-dropping just for myself, because I kind of surprised myself while I was writing it. And it's the dumbest thing ever. Because in my mind, like again, I'm a weirdo. In my mind, this is the grossest thing I've ever written. Like most stomach churning. Like I couldn't literally, I was supposed to eat lunch right after I wrote this scene and I couldn't eat lunch. And it was the butter scene. The butter scene with Britt where she gets possessed and she's like
yeah.
shoveling butter into her mouth, and it made me so fucking nauseous. I was like, this is I was like, this is horrible. This is the by far the worst thing I've ever written. And it was so funny because I was like, because I give pages, I'll give like 20 pages at a time to my wife as I'm writing it. And I'm like, hold your horses, be ready. There's some really messed up stuff coming. And she reads it and she's like, when does the messed up stuff come? And I'm like, the butter. And she's like, are you serious?
Oh.
Yeah. And I'm like, no, it's like the grossest thing I've ever written. She's like, it's so far from the grossest thing you've ever written. It's so far from the most like descriptive or violent or frightening thing you've written. And I'm like, to me, I'm still like, I can't even read the scene again without being like my stomach turned. I don't know. I find it repulsive in a way that I like. I can't even describe properly how repulsive I find it. And like nobody else agrees with me. They're all like, no, there's way more fucked up. They're like, do you realize you wrote a part where they like cut off a dude's fingers, stuck blades into it, and cauterized it, right? And I'm like, yeah, that's fine. Like that happens in horror movies all the time. How many times in movies have you seen someone eat 2 pounds of butter?
Do you
I
realize
don't
how much
know.
butter that is?
Yeah, like I don't know. Things that scare me are not things that I feel like should be scary. Like I can watch any horror movie and be like, great, that was a good time. Terrifier 2 was hilarious. Let's go to bed. But like, you want to talk about something that gave me nightmares? I watched Succession this year. Oh man. Going to bed, I just had nightmares that my family didn't love me anymore.
Oh my
That gave
gosh.
me nightmares. I woke up and I was like, oh my God, I had the worst nightmare. My wife's like, be like, what happened? Are you okay? Like, what was in the nightmare? And it's like, my mom says she didn't love me and that she like didn't want me to like do anything or like didn't want me around in her life anymore. And she's like, oh, yeah, that's like upsetting, but like nobody died or anything. Like, no, they were just mean. They were just mean. My family was mean to me. And it was really scary. Like that gives me nightmares. And apparently butter. So there's a weird glimpse into my psyche.
No one give Jon butter.
I like butter on bread. Like I just
Okay, 2
feel like
pounds
if
of
you're
butter.
eating just butter, like it needs to be with something. I don't know. I don't know why it seems so disgusting to me to eat just like a fistful of butter. But
But the
no, I hate it.
character,
I
I'm
hate
Tell
gonna
it.
that
put
the
to
a
your
character,
4-year-old
scene.
because oh man.
In my try not to die, I'm going to put a butter eating scene just for you.
Oh, please do, Mike. I would love that.
but the
That would
character and what you had her eat could not have been any more fitting.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, it could have been 10 times gruesome or thing than butter, and it just wouldn't have had the same effect as the butter and that character.
Yeah, honestly, I can't even think of a food that would have been worse for her to eat. Like a real food that would be stocked in a kitchen. Like, there's always like Fear Factor, whatever. Like, oh, you got to eat rats and cockroaches. Like, yeah, sure, but like real food. I don't know. I don't know what it
I
is
mean,
about butter.
unless she was eating cinnamon and caught on fire.
Yeah, truly.
Mayonnaise is pretty disgusting.
Mm-hmm.
Mayonnaise is disgusting. You're not wrong. I'm not
Yeah.
a mayo fan either.
Um,
It's watching it get made. That's what the
I think if I saw it get made, I might like it more because it's just eggs and oil, isn't it?
Yes,
Yeah,
but that's in itself is nasty.
it's
Yeah,
it's
eggs
the
are pretty
way
gross.
that
I
you
don't like
do it.
eggs.
Yeah,
I don't know. Mayonnaise just grosses me out. But what I was gonna say, I have like a terrible memory, especially when it comes to books. Like for a week or two, I'll remember everything, and then I'll just remember whether I liked it or not. And so, like, I remember I really loved Slashtag. I think I've put it in my top 5 with Night Film and The Last Days of Jack Sparks and The Library at Mount Char. Books I all love, but I couldn't tell you anything about them. I just remember I really like. I mean, I recently reread Jack Sparks. Anyway, that's not important. So I can't remember like the best jaw-dropping moment for me, but I did read my husband the entire epilogue just because like the part with the security guard and it was like a setup, I was like, oh shit, what? So I sat there, I told him the entire book because he'll listen to audiobooks, but he doesn't really read because he's too busy, like he plays video games, so he doesn't have. So if I'm reading a really good book, I'll just tell him the entire story. So I did that. I spent like 15 minutes telling him the whole book just so I could read the epilogue where I was like, but she knew it was him. It was a setup.
Oh, that's a Mary. I love that. That's an amazing story. And I totally get what you mean. Like, because at a certain point, also when you read like a lot of books a year, it gets to the point where it's like I remember a couple things. I remember like my favorite parts, and then I just remember that I really liked it. Like I like things like with like Hollow. I remembered things that it was when I went back and read like Damn to Hell. I was like, I remember this character. I remember this happening. But like, yeah, I'm like, I remember like the teeth guy in Hollow, and I'm never gonna forget him. Like
Yeah,
that's
that
something
was
I will
Man,
never
that one was
forget.
bad.
that was actually my
Oh.
most recent Brawl read, so it's still pretty fresh. And
Yeah.
Oh my god, the holes in the hands.
Oh.
Stop! Don't do that, Mike. Don't do that. It's so rough.
Those characters will be back in the sequel for the Try Not to Die book, so be ready.
Ew, there's gonna have like seeping butter out of holes.
Fair enough. Butter. I'll find a way to be free butter. That'll be good.
I can't wait to read your entry into Try Not to Die. Also, just because Hollow felt like to me, I know I put this into my review of it also, but it felt like watching the first 3 seasons of Lost, when every episode you'd come in and you'd just be like, what is happening? This mystery is getting deeper, and I am so in. And like, what's gonna happen? What are these slugs? What are these people who have these cuts all over their foot? Is this gonna come back? How's it gonna come
I
back?
appreciate that. Lost is my favorite show, so that's a hell of a compliment.
I truly and I love From. I don't know if you're watching From, but if you're not, you should, because it's like a spiritual successor to Lost.
No, that you probably should start it then. Now.
Yeah, it's very, very good. But yeah, I have that same thing where like I'll forget books relatively quickly, even if I really loved them. I loved Angel Van Ada's In the Tall Trees. I thought it was fantastic, but mostly like I read it a couple months ago, and mostly I just remember it was the most fucked up episode of Rugrats I've ever seen. And it was fantastic. It was so good. But like I wish I remembered more of the plot points. I remember like the main beats of it, but I don't remember a lot of like the nuanced parts, which was what was so good about it. The nuance of every piece of the story. Which boy, I regret having this happen at the same time as Angels one, because I would have loved to be in on Angels Q&A too.
Oh yeah. They didn't even have it today because Angel was sick.
Oh really?
Oh good.
Oh well, like horrible for her, but great for me, because now I can show up.
Yeah.
No, I get that. The whole entire can't remember the books type thing. I can't even remember my own fucking books, man. Like I'm now working on a short story that's a follow up for the Valley, and I had to go reread so much of the Valley because I knew there was pieces in the short story, but I can't remember them because I wrote it a couple years ago. So I get that entirely. But do you find that, John, when you're writing Slashtag, go back, or does this all come back to you naturally?
Yeah, it does. So when I did Try Not to Die, like I said, having these like pieces of paper that were my maps were like so valuable, because I was like, these are the rooms that I had already made and didn't get to. And so I was like, okay, cool. I don't have to reread the whole book now to know, because like I kind of kept track of it here. But
so you plot?
Sorry, yeah.
You plot then?
I half plot. I build, because my everything comes from honestly me playing Dungeons and Dragons since I was 12 years old. I would create all my own worlds, and I would come up with every possible idea of like what my players were going to do, and every single time, even if I came up with 9 different possible options, they'd always come up with a 10th. And so from just literally decades of doing this of D&D, I came to have this method where like I do a lot of world building and a lot of ideas of like what could happen if this happens, what could happen if that happens. And then from there, I don't really plot out the story as much as I plot out the characters and the situation. And then when the characters do something that is like on point for what they are, it's just like, oh, this is what they would do. Well, let me just look at like what the world here, this world Bible here says happens as a repercussion for what they would do. And it's like, I don't have to like make something new up because I already made it up a while ago. And so I can like, I have like 30 documents that are in each folder for each book that are like every little piece of it that kind of reminds me of what it is. But yeah, I actually just went through that with Creed Falls Massacres. I had stepped away from it because I had a bunch of board game projects I had to do from when I first submitted it to Wicked House to now I have to do my I'm getting ready for like my final drafts for it and making some changes after my dev edit. And I like had to spend like 4 days just rereading everything to be like, what was I going for? What did I do wrong? And what do I need to fix and do completely differently for this next draft? And so like, yeah, I'm going through that like literally with a book I'm in the middle of writing right now, where I had forgotten major things and was like, oh yeah, this is like really, really important. I need to like punch this up for this next draft and make it feel like it's more it's really there. So yeah, I totally get what you mean about you can absolutely forget things that you've already written. It's weird that it happens, and it makes me remember that one like it's like an old Simpsons episode where they're at a convention and someone's talking about an Itchy and Scratchy thing, and they're like, when they're playing a xylophone on Scratchy's ribs, he plays the same rib twice, but it produces two different sounds. And the writer's like, I don't fucking know. It's like that.
It's like when there was Jack Black was being interviewed and they're like, "Oh, what's your favorite holiday movie? What about the one you were in?" And he's like, "What are you talking about? I wasn't in a Oh my god, I was." That's
It's
like one of
literally
my
called The Holiday.
He's like, "That's right. I was in a holiday movie."
Right? Yeah, it happens. I mean, hey, Gwyneth Paltrow never even knew she was in some of the Spider-Man movies. It happens. Oh boy.
Man.
All right. Well, hey, I feel like I've kept everyone for a real long time already. Does anybody have any other questions or things that they insults they'd like to hurl at me before we close out the night?
I can't think of anything.
What is your plan with Sean's hand going into the sequel if you get to write a sequel? Because you kind of that to me, you really handicapped him there, and
literally,
I kind of want to know what your literal plan is going forward with them, because you could go so many directions. It would be so much fun to write that open-endedly. So I'm kind of curious what you think you're going to probably have to do that.
Yeah, because I'm going to have to do something. It's interesting because so like I had mentioned that I'd written the first book of an urban fantasy trilogy a long time ago. And my plan, honestly, for Sean has become what was originally the plan for possibly for a character in that book in book 2. So my life is built around this disease, the Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. Like, just for context, in order to sit down to write, I have to put on a pair of compression sleeves. I have to put on a pair of copper-lined compression gloves, and then I have to put on a full-on set of rollerblading wrist guards, just so that my wrists and arms don't fall apart while I write. And then I have to take like a leave in hot baths and stuff. Like, my arms are like 7 levels of messed up. And so that's always been something that's on my mind. And so in this book, it's called Otter. It's based on it's a town in Alaska where weird stuff happens. But I have a character who only has one arm in that book. And originally I wanted to give him some sort of like an amulet or something that like lets him have an arm in the second book, even if it's like a mystical arm. And I'm kind of thinking about taking that storyline and giving it to Sean and giving him some sort of or either whether it's Tawny doing it or Sean doing it himself, now that they're aware that like magic exists and that there are these like objects of power, finding ways to use them to either heal themselves or to not necessarily heal, but to put band-aids onto themselves. Because like yeah, like we say that like April's wounds have healed, like her kidney wounds have healed in the epilogue, but that doesn't mean that like April's all better. It doesn't mean that she's not carrying around trauma in her body, right? Like things don't just like get fixed in real life. Like, nothing gets just fixed in real life. And so Sean's definitely going to deal with taking an effort to get fixed, but I think in the end, like, in my life, because write what you know, right? And take pieces from your life that make sense. I think Sean's going to have to come to grips in long term, and maybe I'm spoiling a whole bunch right now of my plans, but I think Sean's going to have to eventually come to grips with a lot of things. There's a lot of things that happened in the book that he already had to come to terms with. And I think that his hand is no different. It's just a different journey. It's a new journey for him of obstacles to overcome. And honestly, I can't think of a stronger character to give that obstacle to try and face it. But there's going to be some fucked up stuff that happens, and it's not going to be easy.
So, but going off something you said in the middle there, you insinuated that April, because I thought that April being able to walk again was like a temporary thing that the amulet was allowing to happen. Has the amulet just straight healed her now?
So that's a great question. It's something that I feel like I've already overplayed my hand that I maybe need to reel back and be a little more cagey on. The amulet has a tremendous amount of power, but the amulet requires certain things to work, and it requires certain things to continue to work. Maybe I'll just leave it at that, because that sounds kind of cryptic.
No, I got what you're saying. The amulet requires an insane amount of butter to be eaten per quarter.
Yes, let's put it that way, Mike. The amulet needs a lot of butter. That's a good question. It is a good question, and it's one that I have 70% of an answer to in my head. It's really the how that. And again, because I don't like to plot too deeply. The worst thing to me is when you plot something and then the characters or the story goes a different direction organically, and you find yourself trying to shoehorn yourself into going the direction to make a plot point happen that you were really excited about initially. And sometimes the story doesn't end up where you thought it was going to, and it goes somewhere else. And it's like, oh, I don't want to be super tethered down to something that I've decided I loved and follow that just because I mandated it for myself. I like to give myself the room to explore other avenues if other avenues feel like they're better, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Was there
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I had a college professor who I went to film school, and his motto was "Kill your darlings," which is it's advice that people get in all sorts of things, which is it's just kill your babies, be ready to throw out the thing that you love the most if it's not the best part, if it's not going to make your thing better. Even if you love it deeply, you gotta let it go. And so that's something that I always keep in mind when writing, is that no matter how much or how excited I was about one idea when writing a story or entering a story, that idea may never even make it to the page. And that's okay, because the story might be better because I went somewhere else.
I was just wondering, was there a particular reason why you have the scene where Tanya ends up in the shower and she gets out and now she has to put this dress on? Or was that more of just a carryover to fill space to go to the next?
No, I mean, I know the book is long, but everything in it is pretty deliberate. The clothing change was to show two things. First of all is a practical reason, which is that I didn't want her to be covered in coal and dead people dust the whole book. That didn't feel like a realistic character choice for somebody, especially somebody whose job is that they are a kind of a fashion and health guru. It doesn't make sense for that person to remain in filthy clothes for the whole story. And so she did intend on putting her old clothes back on once they were dry. It's just that Derek stole them,
Right.
which was another plot point that needed to push us further toward Derek and getting down into that basement. And then the other thing is that we had a sort of a Jim Jones situation with Arthur's second coming when he came back to the hotel and he killed all these people. And I kind of wanted to show that these people never really even had the time to like pack up, right? Nobody planned on leaving. And so all the clothes are still there. These are things that have been here for sometimes for some people of almost 100 years in these closets. And so it's like, oh, this is all still here. It also made Tawny kind of like it gave her an empowering moment where she's like, fuck this dress. This dress is not like helping me run. I need to cut this thing open. And again, that's another level of like her moving through the story and embracing, because we want her in the beginning to not be embracing like that she's a horror fan, and that's her secret weapon, right? Her secret weapon is that she knows horror, but she kind of all comes into it almost feeling like it's a weakness, because she's like, oh well, I'm like supposed to be playing like the scared, playing my character, right? This character who's like, oh, I'm beauty and I'm gentle and I'm delicate, and it's like, no, I'm not. I'm a badass who knows horror, and a badass who knows horror knows that you need to have leg room to run. So like you got to cut that.
So also, it was kind of a way of making her realize that her continuing to play this persona that she really wasn't was hurting her more than if she had just been herself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Also, it's one of many real deep cut Buffy references. There's an episode in season 6 when Buffy is trying to get a loan at a bank, and so she has to dress real nice, and a demon comes and breaks into the bank, and she's wearing a really nice skirt, and she's like, I can't fight in this, and so she steals the guy's letter opener, and she stabs open her dress so that she can do high kicks. And it's just, again, it's an empowering moment. It's like, look, this isn't time for business Buffy, this is time for business Buffy. So like, again, it's just an empowering moment. I felt like I don't wear dresses personally, so like I don't, but I feel like they're probably very constricting to do karate in, or be a badass in, and so you know, I wanted to give Tawny that opportunity.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sorry for like massively over explaining. Everyone should rewatch Buffy. It's the best show.
Oh, it's on Hulu. I have Hulu.
It is on Hulu. My wife and I, it's the reason my wife and I are married. We were set up on a blind date, and we bonded over Buffy and talked for like 4 hours at a Starbucks on a blind date about Buffy and how it was both of our favorite thing of all time. It's what inspired me to finally decide when I was in high school to actually be creative and like take a jump and a risk. If it weren't for Buffy, I wouldn't have written my first one-act play in high school, which was the first thing that really was outside of Dungeons and Dragons, being like, I'm going to write something and I'm going to do something with it. And it was 100% Buffy inspired, and everything since then has, you know, I ended up going to film school because I wanted to make things that made other people feel the way that I felt when I watched Buffy, which was that I felt like anything is possible, and that you can write these really great stories with really great arcs, that with people that feel real, that can tell dark stories but also be funny, that can tell stories that are upsetting but also highly metaphorical and mean something to our real lives. I will just talk forever about Buffy if you let me, so I'm just going to stop right there.
This book, you dive head first into very shallow water with the social media, you know, fandom that goes on anymore, and about how important it is to so many people how many likes they have. In your opinion, do you think that there are really that many people that live their entire lives based off of what YouTube or TikTok or whoever happens to be the thing at that moment, based on their likes? You know, oh, well, this person has, 50,000 likes, so they have to be all that in a bag of chips. Or do you think the majority of people really take the time to research these people to find out, are they who they say they are?
Yeah, I don't think people research people much at all. I think that it is very much likes based. I mean, look at some of the most popular people on social media who have all of these likes and have all of these fans. People like Logan Paul, people like PewDiePie, who like said some really, really awful things and is still like one of the most followed people in the world on YouTube. There's a lot of people who can just say literally anything, and as long as they're popular, they get likes, they get followers. It's a brand. People, I mean, everybody is a brand now. And unfortunately, like I'm a brand. I hate that. I hate being on social media. I love books of horror. Don't get me wrong. I love books of horror. It's my favorite place on the whole internet. But boy, do I hate being in the machine of social media. I don't love it. There's too many of them. I feel like an old curmudgeon here, being like, there's too many damn social medias out there. That's why I made
there
just
are,
one.
though.
But there
That's
are.
why there's just
you're
one in
absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And that's why I was asking the question, because for me personally, I watch some of these quote unquote, superstars or rock stars or whatever you want to call them that have all these likes. And there are some people that I just look at and I'm thinking, this is a show. You know that this person is not like this all the time. There's no way. And it scares me to think that we have a generation of such deliberate, excuse me for my language, ignorant people out there that aren't willing to actually take that second look and see the lights and the camera and the script in a lot of ways of what they watch and just take everything for face value.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, who would have thought that giving everybody the entirety of all human knowledge of all human history at our fingertips would be the worst possible thing that could ever happen to us?
Exactly.
It's just crazy that, yes, this is the world we live in now. I
guess I'm old fashioned. I was born in the 80s. I'm an 80s baby. I'm Generation X. And we didn't have, all of the vast amounts of information at our fingertips like everybody else does. And, I still remember, if you wanted to know something, you went upstairs and you pulled the huge encyclopedia book out, alphabetical, and you looked it up and, and went from there. And even then, that was very vague to some extent. But, it just makes me wonder, how is it that that in this day and age of all this information, that people aren't more involved and more, wanting to learn more instead of taking things for face value? It's like, it's almost like, if you've got thumbs up, if you've got hearts, if you've got this, then you're all that in a bag of tricks. And, in some ways, a lot of the people that are on there are great and, they mean well, but in others, it's kind of like watching an episode of, Howdy Doody. You're just assuming that, that this person. And like the old saying says, never meet your heroes because you might be surprised. But, it just baffles me. And I would not consider you to be part of that machine, that mechanism. This is my second time, interacting with you, and you seem very genuine. And I can see not only your personality with you on camera, but it comes out in your writing and how you tell a story.
Well, first of all, thank you. That's very sweet of you to say. The best answer I can give on that is that I'm really, really bad at being a brand. I'm really, really bad at social media. I'm pretty much incapable of being anything but myself. Some people, yeah, some people are really good at putting on a show and putting on an act. And I love putting on an act and putting on a show. Like at some point, I'm probably going to do a video AMA as Arthur Wilson. I have a costume. I've shot
That's
videos.
awesome.
It's
Yeah.
probably going to happen. And that's all for funsies. But no, I mean, this is me. But I, you know, like I'm lucky enough to have a platform to like talk to all of you people tonight, which is like crazy cool. But but I wouldn't be doing this if I hadn't had to do all of the work to interact and reach out and put myself out there in a place that I'm not comfortable putting myself normally. And again, Books of Horror has been like an incredible place. And I swear that horror fans are the best fandom and the most just delightful people. Like I go to horror cons. I was at StokerCon last weekend where I did meet my heroes. Paul Tremblay is an incredibly nice man, but also so competitive. Just like unbelievably competitive. I got to share a table with John Langan, like who wrote The Fisherman, and I thought he was going to be
Wow.
this serious dude, funniest guy like I've ever met, like so nice. And then I've gone to other shows like Monster Palooza, Midsummer Scream, these horror conventions where like the scarier someone looks, the cooler they are and the nicer they are, the more well-adjusted they are. Horror fandom is different than every other fandom, and I've worked in the board games industry for a long time. I'm a huge fan of everything, like God, meet a Star Wars fan. Like they're horrible. Like I love Star Wars, but man, they're bad people. They're like, well, there shouldn't be black people in Star Wars, and you're like, what are you talking about?
Whoa.
First of all, Lando Calrissian, okay? Before we get anywhere else. But like, second of all, did you see Mos Eisley Cantina? Most of those people were blue. Like,
Yeah, really.
Come on, what are you doing talking about getting mad about diversity in Star Wars? Get out of
Well,
here.
I think that's why horror is so it's such a small group, but it's widely known. And I think it's because the weirder you are, the more likely you are that you know that you're not going to be accepted by quote unquote what's okay in society. And so it makes it that much more easier for you to be you.
Absolutely. We're all weirdos, and I think we all embrace that we're weirdos. Like you have to accept the weirdness in you before like you can be anything other than the real you. Right? And I think that horror fans have the least amount of shame about that. Where people who are horror fans are like, yeah, I'm living my life as a horror fan, and I'm not going to be like ashamed of that. And horror fans also tend to read a lot, which like really inspires like critical thinking skills. There's a lot of things about being a horror fan that like I think do go hand in hand with being like a decent person. I remember there was a poll when the pandemic first hit, and they said that horror fans, like by a wide margin, were the most well adjusted to the pandemic because they were like, yeah, well, we've like lived through a bunch of zombie apocalypses already. So like I already know, like I've thought about this. Right, but like you think about it, right? You walk out of 28 Days Later and you're like, well, gosh, these zombies were faster than the zombies in this other thing I saw. What would I do in this situation with fast zombies? And like, but that's critical thinking, right? That's you thinking about things beyond a base level. And that's something that I think horror fans do. And that's what makes, I think, the horror fandom and the horror community so great. I think we also are all just like anxious people. We've all got like trauma. We've all got stuff that we're scared of that are like, I've figured out a way to like wear my own trauma on my sleeve in a way that I can like move through my life in a way that I'm okay. And I don't have to go on the internet and yell at people anonymously in order to feel better. I can just watch Michael Myers like chop a bunch of people up and feel okay. Like, or I can read a book, about something bad happening. But safely.
I just wanted to personally say thank you for writing an outstanding and mind-blowing book. It's one of my favorites, easily on my top 3 lists so far for this year.
Thank you.
That I recently went through some extremely bad news. Right before Slashtag was released and was diagnosed with MS, and your
I'm
book,
sorry.
that's okay. Your book helped with a lot of long nights of being in pain after 3 and 4 and 5 hours of physical therapy. So from one person with a disability to another, I commend you for everything you've done, and from my heart, thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. That means a lot to me. I know that Ehlers-Danlos is not even close to being on the same level as MS, but I do know what it's like to live in pain all the time. I know what it's like to never feel like you're a normal person, because of that pain, and it can really affect the way that you approach every aspect of your life when you don't feel normal because you're in pain. And so that's a lot of what I try to write about is kind of coming to coping with that. I will never be on Survivor, but I can watch it from home and be like, wow, it's really cool that these people can do all of these things with their hands and legs that I can't. It does. It helps you to kind of process things, and it helps you get through hard times when you know that somebody else, even if it's in a fictional story, that they're going through hard times that you can kind of empathize with. So yeah, thank you so much for telling me that. And I thank you for I guess validating that for me, that what I'm writing, it is very personal to me, and it is very much a lot about my issues and my pain that I live in every day. And so I guess thank you that it resonated.
No, it did. It did. A lot of it, like I said, when we were discussing earlier about, the 7 deadly sins, I picked up on it and I was like, wow, okay, I see where he's going with this. And then the H.H. Holmes, and it brought to light so many aspects of not only trauma that most people may never ever understand or might have a minute, but you took so many different portrayals of different trauma and different crap that go on in the world that it seems like most are oblivious to, and you threw it in everybody's face and said, see, this is what's going on, you need to pay attention. And that was awesome. And a lot of writers don't write that.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I like I said, I research a lot, and I put a lot of myself. I don't write stories just to write stories. I write stories because I have a lot of feelings. And so I have to get them out somehow. And for me, it's writing. And so I thank you for sticking with me so far in my writing journey. I promise that I will continue to only write stories that are personal to me, that do resonate with me, and that have meaning to me. Because otherwise, for me, what's the point? Thank you for sticking with me. Thank you for sticking with me tonight. I feel like it's real late for all of you right now. It's only 7:30 for me, but I feel like it's real late for all of y'all. So I feel like I should let you all go. I feel like I'm some sort of weird, like, I've got you as my captive audience, and you're all like being polite to stay on.
It didn't start at 10:30, so we're still an hour before that here. So I still have some energy.
Well, I know Friday is still ahead of us. I know it's still ahead of me. So I think I'm gonna let everybody go unless anybody has any last questions.
I do have one real quick one, and it's not even really a question, and I really debated about whether to say anything or not, but I think I would pinch myself if I didn't. Twice in the book, instead of calling it the barrel, you call it the nozzle of a gun. And I was just wondering why?
Yeah, that's a great question. use the same words sometimes a lot, and sometimes I want to use a different word for something, and sometimes it's maybe not the right word. But I feel like I've used another word so many times that I'm like, I can't keep using the same word. I gotta use something else. And so I used something else. And maybe nozzle wasn't the best word to use.
My husband is like a gun person, and I'm not. I don't really know anything. So I was just, the second time I read it, I was like, this isn't right, is it? And I asked him, and he was like, no. And I was like,
no.
maybe
You know
where
what?
maybe he's in a region where some people call it the nozzle of a gun. I don't know.
Maybe I was thinking of muzzle.
That could be it.
You know, I do a lot of research, but I also tend to sometimes think I know things that I don't. I depend a lot on other people to just implicitly know things better than I do. Like in everything is temporary. This is a fun little like weird aside that has nothing to do with anything and doesn't really answer your question, but it's an interesting fact. I learned during my research, and after I'd written already like several drafts, I was talking to a friend of mine who's an ADA in California. He goes, just so you know, like you have this judge that uses this gavel in all of these scenes. Gavels haven't been used in California since 2010. I don't know why, but they haven't. And I was like, oh.
Fun fact.
That's so, I would have expected to be like, gavels haven't been used since the 1800s. It was only 13 years ago?
And only in California. Other states still use gavels.
That's weird.
I don't know why, but you know, there's only so much research before when you kind of feel sometimes confident that you know something. Like I thought nozzle was the same thing as muzzle. I was wrong. Thank you. Thank you for letting me know. I'm definitely in the next version gonna fix it.
No, now you can just say like it was absolutely on purpose and it's the cool way to do it. And anybody who says anything else just doesn't know what they're talking about.
Now, here's a question. The end of squirt guns, do they call those nozzles?
I have no idea.
I don't know.
I feel like it might have also come from just squirt guns.
Because it does seem applicable to a squirt gun to call it a nozzle.
Yeah.
I don't really use guns, so I don't know that much about guns. Yeah, no, that's an oopsie daisy for me, but thank you for pointing it out.
From now on, it was definitely on purpose.
Perfect. Great. We'll say that. This definitely isn't being recorded and posted tomorrow. There's I will leave you. I'll leave you with one anecdote that makes me feel a little bit better. And I won't say the author or the book to make it even a little bit better, but you can look it up on your own. At one point in this guy's book, and this is somebody with like a real like big publisher. He talks about like some form of not alchemy, but like making a stew. Basically he's making something with ingredients, and he says, yeah, you put this ingredient, you put this ingredient, you put this ingredient, and there you go, you have this thing. It turns out that's how you make that thing in Zelda video games.
I've heard that before.
He just typed up in his research, how do you make like a poultice, and it was how to make a poultice in Breath of the Wild.
That's hilarious.
He didn't know
That's
that.
So cute though.
And he thought he did his research, and he was like, yeah, this is how you do it. And it's like a whoopsie daisy, but he left it in the book after he found out, because he's like, well, fuck me, I'm a dummy. So yeah, maybe we'll leave nozzle in there as my fuck me, I'm a dummy moment. But I learned something tonight, so thank you for teaching me a little bit more about guns.
I'll have my husband start using the word nozzle with like all of his gun buddies. I don't know if he has gun buddies. He doesn't really talk to anybody about it, but we'll get it started.
Great. This is where it starts. We're going to make fetch happen.
I was just about to say that. We're going to make fetch happen.
Perfect. No, but thank you. That's actually really interesting, and I'm glad that I can either purposely make an ass of myself in the future, or sidestep making an ass of myself if someone's ever pointing the muzzle of a gun at me. Or maybe I can diffuse it by saying, "Don't point that nozzle at me." I don't know. Maybe it'll make him more angry.
What?
I don't know. I always go back to that Hey Arnold episode where he wants to get out of a fight by making himself seem like he's crazy. That's how I'd get out of a fight, because I'm not good in a fight. Again, I got this. It's not good for me. All right. Well, I think that was the perfect last question, because I came in here expecting to be made a fool of, and I'm a little disappointed that I wasn't made more a fool of. So, thank you, Shelby, and thank you, everybody. Again, and thank you, Becky, so much for putting this all together.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
This has been so much fun for me, and we're gonna have so much fun in this group through the brawl. Up until I get my ass completely kicked by Ben Farthing. But we're gonna have a great time, and let's just keep this train rolling and have a good time. Let's just we'll do the read-alongs together. Whoever wants to participate in that, we'll have some more conversations. I'll make some more silly videos. We'll do some more silly stuff, and just have a good time. This is not a place to be stuffy. We'll have a good time. All right. Well, with that, thank you, everybody, again for coming, and have a great night.
Thanks so much, John. Thank you.
All right. Going to stop recording.